Welcome to my review of Redeemer Enhanced Edition for the Xbox One. Now, this is on multiple platforms. I was playing it on Series X, but I don't know if it runs any better. But the game runs well. It's a great game. It's isometric basically, and it's it's a twin stick shooter, you could say, but it's kind of more of a twin stick beat 'em up in a lot of ways. It kind of depends at what part of the game you're at. You know, there's parts earlier on where it's more of a twin stick beat 'em up, but it kind of just moves over into more of a shooter as you get so many more weapons available. But it's always a nice mix. You always have those moments where you're just beating someone's skull in with a pipe, and then you have a moment where you're shooting people. So, and monsters and shit like that. So it's a really nice mix. And there's ability trees. There's abilities that you unlock to get more powerful. You can upgrade your weapons and things like that. You pick up weapons on the field, but you can upgrade each different type of weapon, and once you do that, whenever you pick up that weapon type, it will have all those upgrades automatically applied. So, like a lot of games, this has the Doom 2016 finisher mechanic. The glory kills, pretty much, are built into this game, which is great for a twin-stick shooter. It makes it to where there's a really nice pace to the combat. You have charge attacks, as you see me doing with this crowbar, where you just hold the button down and release. And now you can spam charge attacks pretty aggressively and pull a lot of bullshit, clear out a lot of enemies that way if you are patient with it. But, as you get a little farther in the game, spamming the charge attacks is not nearly as effective anymore because you'll get overwhelmed. So you do have to actually, play well as you get farther into the game. But it's not super difficult. I mean, it's a decently challenging game, but it's not extreme or anything like that. But it does have a little bit of a challenge. There's a few tricky parts. I didn't have a shit ton of deaths. I mean, there were some parts where I died several times, but most of the time I was kind of cruising through. But again, that's all relative to your how familiar you are with these type of games. You can also go up to environmental objects and hit B to throw them into the enemies for a lot of damage. So you want to utilize the environment as well. And of course, you have guns. You have various melee weapons that break after a few strikes. So you want to replace them, routinely. You want to keep replacing them whenever you can to keep them fresh. Otherwise, you'll be down to your fists. And if you don't have a gun or anything, then you'll just be fist only until you grab some more shit. You can hold one melee weapon and I believe one gun. So it's good to try to have both whenever possible and to pick up shit on the field. So yeah, I played through this game on the, I believe it was on the default or like normal, something like that. And it wasn't too difficult, but it does have a few challenging moments. Like this here is a big arena battle. And I believe I completed this battle on my first try without dying, but I mean, I could see this being kind of tough because it's kind of an endurance. Now, of course, when you execute enemies, the way you execute enemies, you have to wound them a certain amount. When they're wounded enough, they will go into like a finisher style, mode where an icon will show up on them and they're ready to be finished off. And if you go up to them and hit the button that you do for the finishers, you will finish off, and that's how you get health back. So it's a very important mechanic with surviving. When your health gets low, you want to do those finishers. So that's kind of what keeps the pacing of the game exciting, because a lot of times, your health will get low, and the only way to get it back is to do a finisher, as you see me doing there. Now the game does have a few boss fights, but there's maybe only 3 or 4. It would have been better if it had more boss fights. But the boss fights are kind of cool, though. I was able to spam charge attacks on the first few bosses, I believe. So they weren't the most exciting fights, but they were cool. It's a cool addition, but I think it would have been even better with more boss fights. And the final boss is it's kind of a fun fight, but it's pretty damn simple. It could have had a better climax to the whole thing. And another issue that I had with the game is with the upgrades. I thought was fucking horrible. Like, it was very, very hard to understand how do I do my next upgrade. How do I get the next upgrade? It's like it's all this shit with like it says something about tablets and manuscripts and all this shit, and I was like, fuck that. I mean, sometimes I would be able to get the upgrade to activate, but I didn't know like what I did differently. You know what I mean? And it was just it was a little weird to use. But I mean, when you fiddle around with the menus enough, you'll get upgrades and stuff. But it's just kind of like it could have been a lot more straightforward on how you do it. I believe it's tied into certain items you collect, like manuscripts and tablets on the field, and I don't remember if it was an experience system, like where I think you do get XP for killing enemies. There is a finite amount of enemies. I know that. Areas where you can farm enemies infinitely to rack up experience points or anything like that. So you're not able to like grind. It's really not an RPG, but it has some RPG elements. But it's basically just a combat game. A twin-stick combat game is what I would call it because, it can be a twin-stick shooter, but it can also be, twin-stick obstacle navigation where near the end of the game you have to dodge lasers and do these obstacle courses where you don't really fight anything. And then there's also, like just twin-stick beat-em-up where you're just beating the shit out of people. So, I mean, it's interesting. For a twin-stick game, it kind of mixes it up, which is cool. It's not just a twin-stick shooter or just a twin-stick beat-em-up. And I haven't really played a lot of twin-stick beat-em-ups. I mean, there's a few that come to mind, like Mr. Shifty, but, I have not played many of them. So it is cool to see that it's not just straightly just going around with guns and shooting shit. Now, I was using a King Kong Pro 2 controller, which is an amazing controller made by some Asian manufacturer. I don't even know exactly, but it was about a $60 controller, and using an XMB adapter by Brook, I'm able to use it on the Xbox One and Series X. So I played through the Series X, and the sticks have no dead zone, basically. It has a no dead zone setting, and they're not supposed to ever get drift because they use a Hall sensor tech, which I guess is more of a sensor tech where it's not supposed to wear out as far as drift goes. So, but they feel so fucking smooth and responsive. They're incredibly good for twin stick games. I mean, the level of accuracy with the aim just feels so tight, and it feels fucking great. So, if you're into twin stick shooters, keep that adapter and that controller in mind. Definitely felt way better than using my Elite controller, which has a lot of fucking dead zone. I don't know why Xbox never fixed that with their controllers, but it's still a great controller overall. But it has definite weaknesses when you play something like this. That's a twin stick shooter, and you want really accurate twin stick aim. You'll really notice it if you compare that with the fucking King Kong Pro 2 controller. So just a little recommendation to throw into the review. Now, you see near the end of the game, you have some pretty big arena battles with a nice variety of weapons on the ground that you have to pick up. It keeps the flow nice because you run out of your ammo, you got to find another gun, or your hammer will break. You got to find another melee weapon to keep shit going. So you're constantly switching weapons, and just trying to keep it going. And all while you're doing that, you're trying to manage your executions and try to get those executions in because you want to keep your health up too. So this was a pretty intense battle. I don't think it. I may have gotten it on the first or second try, but it was pretty intense. It was very close on this attempt. Because if you don't get your executions in, then you will not get health back. So you gotta try to do that. Now, a cool thing is there's not just environmental shit that you can throw at guys. There's things like this. There's environmental things like these pillars here. If you get close to them, you can wait for an enemy to come close to it, and then you can cram their face into the pillar for extreme damage. There's also table saws where you can do the same thing. So there's a few environmental hazards like that you can use to your advantage. But I was just impressed. I mean, the game has great sound. The camera angles are cool. It zooms in when you do executions. It's got a lot of... The presentation is just great. It's a real brutal presentation. Very cool. Now here I'm going to show the final stretch of the game, which is the final boss and the obstacle course before the final boss. So first you have to do this little obstacle course, which is a little bit irritating. It's not my favorite part of the game, but this is why I probably died the most in the game. So you have to go through these little obstacle courses. So this first is a lightning area, and then after that you have to take out this group of enemies, and then you got to dodge a bunch of flames, basically. And then you get another checkpoint at the final boss, so you don't have to do all that shit again if you complete the obstacle course. But it was an okay. I mean, I didn't think this was the strongest part of the game, but it was cool to see some obstacle navigation thrown in for a change of pace. So I didn't mind it, but I could see it being an irritation. It was a little irritating. But yeah, there's a nice variety, like I said, so I do really like the pacing of the game. And in my playthrough, I have listed exactly how long the game took me to beat. I remember it was a decent length game. It's not super short, and it's really not that long either, but I mean, it's probably like between 4 to 6 hours if I had to remember how long it was. But it is a decent length. Check out my playthrough for more detail on that. I have an unedited playthrough up, so that shows the whole thing. Now, you're going to see the final boss in a moment after these obstacles. And like I said, the final boss was not much of a climax for the game. But I mean, it's okay, but it's pretty damn basic. It's basically just kill a few minions and throw their body at the boss's chamber and then just punch the shit out of the boss for a little while. Kill some more minions and repeat. So it's, a pretty simple boss. Not much to it. And, it's not much of a climax to the game. So here you have another fight with a bunch of enemies. You see that getting that charge attack in can do a lot of damage to a lot of enemies if you group them together. And, like any good beat-em-up, crowd control is a big part of the game. And also, of course, you want to use your corridors and doorways to really group enemies together and punish them all at the same time for the most damage possible. If you're damaging 5 enemies at once with one attack, it's a lot more efficient than trying to damage them individually. So, your beat-em-up basics. So here is the final boss. I think I edited it out, but basically, as I explained it, because I didn't want to spoil it, I usually do show the final boss, but I was like, fuck it, I'll just edit it out. But I think you get the idea. The boss, like I said, the final boss is kind of simple. There's not much to it, but it is fun because, you're completing a game that was enjoyable to play through for the most part. So I did really enjoy the game. And I would give this game an 8 out of 10. I thought it was quite good. And I would highly recommend it if you're into these kind of games. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.